Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Why Shut Down, Dismantling the IMF-World Bank Towards Justice and Transformation. My name is Gail from the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, and I will be moderating today's program. For 80 years, the US-led International Monetary Fund and the World Bank Group have promoted corporate interests through loans attached with neoliberal conditionalities, policy advice, and destructive projects. These institutions have perpetuated neocolonial dynamics that have undermined the sovereignty and development of the global south. Our webinar today will feature a moderated discussion that will expound why social movements and their allies have been calling to shut down the IMF World Bank, given their track record of rights violations and culpability for today's crisis, and towards realizing the right to development, sovereignty, people's rights, as well as accountability and justice. Our discussion hopes to facilitate greater dialogue and understanding among civil society on Southern social movement paths and trajectories in relation to the Bretton Woods Institutions. So here are our rules for everyone who are participating in our Zoom room. Please label yourselves, indicate your name and your organization. Mute yourselves while our speakers are speaking, and turn off your videos. And also, we encourage everyone to maximize the chat box. Feel free to send in your questions and insights. We'll read them out during the open forum segments. So now, before we formally start with the discussion, let me introduce to you our speakers. So first, we have Azra Saeed. Azra is an activist working on women's and peasants' rights. She works with Roots for Equity, a Karachi-based organization that works with small and landless peasants. She is the General Secretary of the International League of People's Struggle, an international formation that promotes, supports, and develops the anti-imperialist and democratic struggles of the peoples of the world against imperialism and all reaction. So Azra, can you say hi to our audience today?
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Azra. Next we have is Emilia Reyes. She is a feminist activist that works as the program director of policies and budgets for equality and sustainable development at Equidad de Género. I hope I pronounced that right. She is the co-lead of the Economic Justice and Rights Action Coalition and the coordinator of the Campaign of Campaigns, promoting cross-movement mobilization around macroeconomic and environmental issues. So Emilia, can you greet our audience?
Hi, everybody. And I'm super happy to be here in this panel with all of these friends, but also sharing with Elaine and Asra. I'm very
We're
looking
also happy
forward
to have
to the
you.
comments.
Thank you. Okay, last but not least, we have Elaine Zuckerman. So she founded Gender Action in 2002 to hold IFIs accountable for harmful gender and environmental impacts and serves as its current president. Earlier in her career, she worked inside the World Bank as an economist on China and anti-structural adjustment advocate. She completed graduate studies during the 1970s at the University of Beijing. So, Elaine, can you say hi to everyone here?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Great to see you all. Thank you, Yvonne, for inviting me, Emilia, Azra, who it's great to see also.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elaine. So at this point of our program, we are going to start with our first round. So we will be asking our speakers question, and then each will share their answers for the questions that we have here. So for our first round, with regard to track record of the Bretton Woods institutions. What is the cumulative track record? So, particularly the harms and injustices of the IMF World Bank that drive peoples and organizations to carry the demand to eventually shut down or dismantle these institutions. So maybe we could hear first from Azra. What's your response to our question?
It's a great question. And I am actually hard pressed to answer this because we have 75 years of loot and plunder, all held at the door of these so-called development banks, the IMF and the World Bank. Now, I just checked, and the IMF is saying that currently it's lending close to $200 billion to over 35 countries. And so, it just now in these few years, it's been giving that much money, and we have 75 years to think about. So it's actually impossible to quantify the impact of these banks, the IMF and the World Bank, on people's lives and livelihood. The social, economic, political, and environmental impacts are manifold and actually have a dominoes effect on each other. And I really would like to emphasize that these banks are not standalone banks as if they have nothing to do with whatever else is happening in the world. They are the finest tools, the finest economic tools of US imperialism. And so please note that the US holds approximately 16% of the IMF's voting rights, and the executive board officially makes its decisions based on a weighted voting system, which is based on the members' financial contributions. Hence, the 16% vote of IMF is very powerful and can veto many of the board decisions, and hence very difficult, if not impossible, to oppose the voting power of the US. So when we talk about the IMF and the World Bank, I think we should always remember that these banks are actually the frontal face of the imperialist financial oligarchy. And the sole purpose of the financial oligarchy, the highest stage of imperialism, is to maintain control over world's capital, its assets, the entire asset base of the world, to use their language, including land, raw material, markets, and labor. So I just, thought how to capture this. And just recently, they have finalized a loan with what they call the standby agreements with Sri Lanka. And I was trying to find what have they agreed upon. And it says they are asking for further trade liberalization to promote exports and foreign direct investment, labor reforms, upgrade skills and increase female labor force participation, and promote a level playing field for the private sector. I'm just reading bits and pieces from here and there. And then if you look at what they have asked for Pakistan, it says strengthen and broaden the tax base. And then again, same language, strengthen competition, secure a level playing field for investment. Now, I will just unpack these words in terms of the people, because your question is really to talk about the injustices and the harm that they have caused. Pakistan and Sri Lanka are just two in many, many countries, and they actually are responsible for millions of people. So what does taxes mean? The taxes are not levied on the elite who have taken away the money and siphoned the money into their bank accounts, which are all kept in the Swiss banks in Switzerland. It does not mean the wealthy farmers who control almost 60% of the land in a country like mine, Pakistan. It just means the working class. So when they increase taxes, it means taxes go up on medicines. It means taxes go up on on all the general sales tax, all the consumer goods were a basic necessity for the the working class, for the peasantry, food and shelter. All of this, the prices go up. And at the same time, it also means privatization. Because they keep on saying, let us uh, make the private sector stronger. So the first thing that the private sector does is to get rid of jobs. And with jobs cut, what it means is really that, and then they ask, no, so nicely, let's get the women working. It basically means that women have lower skills, will get paid lower wages, have a very strong history of living under patriarchy, don't necessarily raise their voices to unionize and organize themselves, because they also have to face the domestic violence once they get home, because if they are seen in public, then the men folk really don't like it at all. And so they get pulled. Both the trade unions and at home, women suffer the loss of jobs of the men, because they have to earn a living, and the living that they earn is half, even less than half of the men, while the cost of food and shelter and electricity and transport has all gone up. I was looking at a study of 180 countries done by an Arab group of academics, and they talk about from 1993 to 2018. And the overriding impact is on women. They were looking at the impact on women is maternal mortality, increase in maternal mortality, pulling out of girls from school, loss of employment, and then very low payment at work. I remember I was working in a squatter settlement in Karachi, and I saw an old woman sitting on a charpai, and she was like just, putting these pens together, 144 pieces of pen being paid for just like 3 rupees. That's not even $1. It's not even 5 cents. And I can keep on telling you these stories. Just recently, they take away, these electricity meters from their homes. And a farmer was telling me that when they take away the meter, there's no electricity at home. And then they have to go back to the head office, give them some money, the meter comes back. They also take away the cable. And I'm talking about Pakistan, where the heat is so intense, all because of the capitalist, this love affair that they have with fossil fuels. It is unbearably hot in my country and across the globe. And then when they take away electricity, how do people survive? You know, I sometimes feel very, I don't like talking about the suffering of the people, because it's not a talk show. It's not something which we just describe and walk away. It's living that life of pain and misery and hunger. Imagine going home after a hard days of work of 12 hours, 14 hours, having to walk part of the journey home because they don't have enough money to pay for the entire voyage. And then getting home and there is no electricity and there is no water and they don't have sufficient food after a hard day's labor. Just imagine the suffering. Look at the people who are sitting on top of these buses, because there are not enough buses on the road on which these people can go back home. And so they sit on top of these buses and they can just fall off. And who's going to look after them? Who's going to pay for their injury? Who's going to take them to the hospital? None of that is being taken care of. And then they talk about how just they are, how against patriarchy they are. They are the ones really who create this kind of violence. I also want to bring out another point, is that land cultivation becomes impossible for small farmers and they end up selling land due to the debt that they incur from the high cost of pesticides and all of the inputs that go into agriculture. Finally, in Pakistan, there is a calibration. Those people, those communities which don't pay the electricity bill will get like 10 hours of what we call power cuts. What happens is that then the people in the community start fighting among themselves. Those who cannot pay, they get heckled, they get beaten up. The children of those houses get called names. So there is shame, there is heckling, and there is community in fights. So there is disruption from the highest to the lowest level of the working class. I think I may be going over time, so I will stop there. I just want to say it's not possible to quantify, even understand the suffering of hunger and starvation and job loss, no matter how much we try to describe it. You have to go live in the communities and go through the lived experience of not having food, not having work, not being able to send your children to school, not having the money to pay for medicines, seeing your parents die of suffering because they could not be treated. So the suffering is unbelievable.
Thank you, Azra, for your response to our question. I do agree with you. It's really difficult to talk about all this suffering, but we always have to because we have a world to change. Now I go to Elaine. No, what's your take on our question? Let me just repeat it first, especially for those who just came in our Zoom room. So again, what is the cumulative track record, the harms and injustices in particular, of the IMF World Bank that drive peoples and organizations to carry the demand to eventually shut down or dismantle these institutions? So Elaine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gail, and thank you, Azra, for such a moving presentation on the really devastating impacts on people who are harmed from bank and fund loans. I'd like to start with a little anecdote that makes me laugh when I think about it. 1 year ago at IBON's conference that paralleled was outside of the bank fund annuals. Actually, Azra and Amelia and I were on a panel, one or more panels together. And when I called for shutting down the bank and the fund, Amelia one-upped me by calling for burning them down. So I thought I would start with that anecdote. Now I'll move into my serious introduction, which is going to be more a response to the cumulative track record historically. So the colonial imperialist countries' corporations, so the key word is corporations, were behind the Bretton Woods Institutions establishment in 1944. The imperialist countries' governments were and remain the political superstructure serving the corporate economic base or infrastructure. Through applying this lens, we can understand that although the bank and the fund are nominally owned by sovereign imperialist states, these states serve corporate interests. So responding to the question, I'm going to present some landmarks in the Bretton Woods Institutions' cumulative track record. So first of all, the Bretton Woods Institutions helped reconstruct Europe following World War II to ensure as much of Europe as possible stayed within the Western capitalist system. And second, starting in the 1950s, the Bretton Woods Institutions shifted their focus to so-called developing countries, which were the colonized countries at that time. It was before many of them attained, you could say, superficial independence. So until around 1980, from the 50s to the 80s, the World Bank focused mostly on infrastructure investments, which facilitated extracting global South resources for the global North. These investments were in transport, energy, agriculture, and other sectors that supplied goods cheaply to the global North. Global South women and men workers provided cheap labor for this extraction, as they do to this day. Practically, in the first few decades, imperialist countries' corporations won contracts to implement World Bank infrastructure projects. These corporations are the real beneficiaries of World Bank loans, not the global South poor women and men whom the World Bank Group and other IFIs, international financial institutions, claim to benefit. The World Bank's dedicated private sector arm, the International Finance Corporation, founded in 1956, to make loans and invest equity in developing countries' private corporations, based on the premise that the private sector is key to development. That premise ignores the fact that profit-seeking private sector-led development exacerbates inequalities, thus undermining the World Bank's rhetorical mission to end poverty. And third, as many of you know, around 1980, the World Bank paradigm shifted when it adapted Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher's neoliberal private sector practices in a big way into the World Bank's two public arms, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which lends to middle-income countries, and the International Development Association, which both lends and makes some grants, a very low amount, to low-income countries. Since then, World Bank loans have contained explicit neoliberal conditionalities to privatize state-owned enterprises, shrink public sectors, and require other measures that I will describe shortly. I want to share that in the introduction, actually, it was mentioned that I actually joined the World Bank when I heard China was joining the World Bank in 1980. So I just wanted to tell you about that background. It gave me, I was like a fly on the wall, viewing how neoliberalism unfolded in the World Bank and the IMF. So just a little bit of personal history. After I studied political economy in the 1970s in China under Mao Zedong, it was hard to find a job in the West focused on China. So when I noticed China was joining the World Bank in 1980, I also joined the World Bank to work initially as an economist on China projects. And shortly after I joined, structural adjustment, spawned by Reagan-Thatcher neoliberalism, began to sweep the bank and the fund. This description may be familiar to you. Joint World Bank IMF structural adjustment programs and structural adjustment loans required borrower countries to restructure and adjust macroeconomic and sector policies by providing quick disbursing indebting loans, requiring borrowers to implement onerous measures that you all know about, and Azra already mentioned a good number of them, but they included, amongst others, privatizing state-owned enterprises, instituting user fees for basic services, which made them unaffordable to the poor, reducing public spending, streamlining public services, including health and education, even while the Bretton Woods Institutions say they protect them, cutting or removing Global South protective export tariffs and subsidies on agricultural, food, energy, and industrial products, thereby reducing Global South borrower countries' revenues, while Global North countries subsidize and dump their products into Global South countries, making them less affordable to the poor, and requiring regressive value-added taxes that also contribute to impoverishing the poor while they are inconsequential to the rich. These kind of onerous measures especially burden women with increased unpaid child, elder, and other care. Women also lose jobs because of their prominent role in the shrinking public sector. So all of these onerous conditionalities, which I saw unfold before my very eyes, although I fortunately did not work on structural adjustment loans. So all of these onerous conditionalities are driven by the Western corporate system, which we began talking about from the beginning, corporatization of the Bretton Woods institutions. To this day, the Bretton Woods institutions and other IFI operations continue to contain such onerous conditionalities. Many of you have fought against them for decades. Over the last couple of decades, the World Bank Group has increasingly promoted IFC collaboration with other World Bank Group arms. In 2017, IDA, the World Bank low-income country arm, established a private sector window for IFC, International Finance Corporation, private sector investments. The private sector window consolidates the World Bank's group's decades-long public-private partnerships, which deliver profits to corporations. Since becoming World Bank president last year, Ajay Banga has been leading a corporate privatization crusade. This should not surprise anyone, since Banga was recruited from being MasterCard president and CEO for a decade, following over a decade in Citigroup senior management, where Banga's training ironically included debt collection. Among Banga's increasing approaches to elevate the private sector in World Bank operations, he's been expanding the World Bank Group's Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, or MIGA, which attracts private corporations as World Bank co-financiers by offering public guarantees to mitigate corporate risks. That is, people's hard-working taxes will guarantee that corporations do not lose a penny when they co-finance World Bank investments. Banga, who plans to triple MIGA's size by 2030, calls MIGA, quote unquote, a secret weapon Yes, it's a weapon. Another Banga approach to expand World Bank private sector activities has been to create a private sector investment lab to advise on removing barriers to private sector investment in emerging markets climate-focused activities. This is a group, Private Sector Investment Lab, of 15 of the world's largest banks. This is commercial banks in the world. And that's who he's hired, Banga, to advise him. So these are, commercial banks and private equity funds that invest in fossil fuels are now Banga's close advisors. So this is the cumulative and ongoing track record that we must dismantle. Thanks for this section.
Thank you, Elaine, for your response. Not only did we learn a bit more about you, we also saw or heard how these Bretton Woods institutions are actually structural tools for neoliberalism to persist in the world in the past how many decades. So yeah, Emilia, would you like to add anything to what Azra and Elaine had said?
Thank you so much. Just want to thank you for inviting me. And I just want to emphasize what Astra and Elaine already said. One is that under the so-called development agenda, what these actors are actually doing is undermine our real economies on the ground, especially in the global south, because there is an imperial project behind the IFIs. And so this is really important. And the second, so the notion of development is an ideological tool as well. With the premise of development for the global south, what they're doing is really taking a hold of all of our resources, our life, our time, our energy, our labor, and including what we call the primitive extraction, right, of the labor of women, but also of nature. So the other element that I want to point out is precisely both have mentioned how this notion of growth, because it is at the heart of their mandate. So when I think I'll just finish this point in saying that there is a proposal for reforming these two institutions, but if at the heart of their mandate is to promote this so-called development that is based on enhancing the monopoly capital, and on the other is promoting economic growth that implies exponential extraction, exponential generation of inequalities, and exponential expansion of the imperial project, then what else do we want to reform if that is at the heart of their mandate, no? I'll leave it there.
Thank you for that, Emilia. Indeed, no, these Bretton Woods institutions, their concept of growth is more on how much profit are they extracting from us, especially from those who are living in the global south. Okay, with that, we'll move on to our second question. But before that, no, we ask our participants here in the Zoom room to please rename yourselves and indicate your organization. We are also live on the Ibon International Facebook page. Okay, so do we have the question? Okay, we'll flash the question on the screen so that it would help guide our participants on how shutdown is supportive of people's aspirations. How could this horizon or vision of shutting down the IMF World Bank in weakening US imperialism enable people's aspirations for, first, rebuilding their domestic and national economies, particularly the industry, agriculture, etc., or advancing the right to development and sovereignty, and second, accountability and justice. So for this round, we ask Emilia to answer the question first.
Thank you so much. This is not an easy question, but to me, it is quite clear that we have a better future ahead if we take the matters into our own hands. So what we see now with the ecological crisis is that there is an imminent collapse that is coming that will be generated by this economic system. So it is either their collapse, meaning their monopoly capital collapse, the one that they're portraying and want to impose on us because they really these conditions of the life of the people that Azra was mentioning. So they're leading a collapse. The IPCC report and all of the scientists report are warning us about exceeding the 7 out of 9 planetary boundaries, and they're still leading us to collapse. So our question is, are we following their collapse, or are we gonna cause our collapse? The collapse in which we dismantle the current system and we find something else, and we try to promote while we bring about some chaos in the world by dismantling these institutions. Also trying to think about what are the transition points for us to move on. So I think people has a lot of things to gain from the dismantling of these institutions. First of all, given that Elaine and Azra have mentioned all of these conditionalities, we will gain back a lot of room for sovereignty, for deciding even our own, the way of the expenditure of our own taxation with the austerity measures that are imposed by the IMF and the World Bank in our countries, mostly the IMF. We don't have the autonomy to spend the money on the public services. We are forced to pay for the debt servicing, plus the interest, plus the surcharges. So it's really a matter of why are we following these rulings? Because I think the question is here, can we survive in a world without, first, an entity that is playing as a World Bank, and second, as a fund that can support development? So I think the answer is no, because we do have a globalized economy that at this moment in time is also making our countries very dependent. But it doesn't have to be this World Bank and this IMF. So I think that is a first answer to the notion of what can we have to gain, and also if we fear that precisely because of the lack of sovereignty, or at the moment the lack of expansion of a fiscal space, can we survive without them? I think there are many answers precisely that are coming from our project of a multipolar world, in which we find more and more alliances within the global south and south-south cooperation, regional cooperation, and also many of these projects that are falling under the umbrella of the delinking project, right? Like economic sovereignty, solidarity trade, and many other elements that come together more in a manner that will require of us to do a closer planning of what do we want from our economic decisions. And so this will also mean more economic democracy at all levels. And I think that it will also help us to reclaim what is the notion of our, because the World Bank and the IMF insist on very condescending and rude to all of us who try to engage with them, and they literally tell us, you don't understand, this is macroeconomy and this is so difficult, so you wouldn't understand why we're doing this. And so undermining the capacity of people to understand that the type of decisions that they're making are harmful for all of us, and undermining the testimonies of the peoples on the ground. So I think people have a lot to gain by really considering as a reality to dismantle these institutions. And I think this poses the question of the reformist path versus the systemic change path. And I think the reformist path would be enough if we would have time, but the ecological crisis is showing us that we don't have the time. And Azra's telling of the situation of people on the ground should also touch our hearts and recognize that there is not enough time also to waste in watching the situation that people are living across the world. So we have a lot to gain. And also, finally, on the issue on accountability and justice, we know that these are imperial tools. I think I will bring a question for the second, for the next stage, in which we can also ask ourselves, what is the role of the military industrial complex? Because I think we are thinking here in an isolated manner that these entities are imposing these conditions through technicalities. And the reality is that when we're talking about imperialism, we're talking very much about repression, oppression, about genocidal regimes, such as the one that we are seeing with now the 1-year anniversary of the genocide in Gaza. And now a new genocide started to expand in all of these regions of the Middle East with the killings in Lebanon, in Syria, etc. So I think we cannot have this conversation if we are serious, just thinking about an economic project without the military project. And I will just also bring this question to the audience, and hopefully we can reflect together on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Emilia, for your sharing. So yeah, I do agree with you that uh, we understand our economy, we understand what role IMF World Bank plays in causing this suffering of the people. And we also know and understand what is our alternative from this kind of system. So yeah, now we move to Azra. What's your response to our question?
I thank you so much for that question. That's also a very an extremely needed question, because when we ask these questions, it sparks our thinking mode, our doing mode, our practicing mode. And to me, I also would like to really thank Amelia for bringing up the military-industrial complex, of which the United States is the biggest. The G7 nations actually love war because their defense corporations go hand in hand with the IMF to accumulate further profits. So what is our response? I think we need to really just think directly in the context of imperialism. There is nothing left in capitalism anymore, nothing, except death, destruction, disease, which we have seen for the past 5 years. Intensely, not the only 5 years, but the entire history of colonialism is riddled with these horrendous, cycles of death and deprivation. So, and the work has been ongoing. I feel we are in a very good position to talk about where do we want to go. I remember that right after the formation of the World Trade Organization, the peasant groups, the small and landless farmers across the world started saying, no, we do not accept this. Just get out of our systems. And the context that was brought together was of food sovereignty, which is a very, very clear enunciation of how do we get rid of imperialism? How do we shut down the IMF and the World Bank? How do we shut down and junk the World Trade Organization? And in its place, we bring out the people's aspirations, the people's struggles, the people's already visioning of an alternate world, which is really dependent on access and control over our resources. And I think one thing which I feel, working with the people in urban and in rural settings, I think the rural people, because they've always had land right there, and they have been able to till the land, their context of understanding their right over resources is very clear. For us, I think our weakness is not instilling that kind of political education amongst workers. Because when you talk to workers, their vision ultimately ends up with higher wages, or unionization. It's not necessarily about controlling industry, of controlling the raw material, of controlling our skills and our human resources. And that is the lesson we have to heighten, to increase. That if for the rural communities we have a vision of food sovereignty, of agroecology, then for urban development we also should have the vision that that plants, that factories, the education systems really need to be about the people and really need to answer to the needs of the people. I feel very ashamed that I can speak English, because the education system is the class-based education system is there to make you powerful, to be able to speak the language of the master. The colonial master for us were English people. I know for Amelia, it was Spanish. And of course, across the world, we have these different colonial languages which control us. And that really stops us from thinking of what is self-determination, of what is our right, and how do we develop in the path of the people. When you go and talk to the people, they know exactly what is wrong in their lives, why their livelihood is not giving them a decent, contented livelihood, a life which is peaceful, I remember asking a woman, what do you envision? And she said, I just want to be lying in a comfortable bed with the fan on top of my head moving. Such a simple aspiration, and so far away, so far away. And so that is why what we need is control over our resources and assets. And our struggles have to be very, very directed towards this. We dismantle imperialism, we dismantle the war industry, we put a complete shutdown of the imperialist various institutions, whether they are economic or they are military prone, and the think tanks which are the academic think tanks, which really are there corrupting our young people, our youth, because in the glamour and glitter of so-called, I don't want to say bad names, but the glamour of capitalism, all these tall buildings which will all fall on our heads, if we have these. And now I'm very happy because with the genocide, sorry, I'm not very happy, but happy because the genocide has taken away this hideous mask of glitter and glamour of capitalism. And it has shown people that self-determination is the first key to saying, this is what we need to do. Again, on accountability and justice, I think the whole context of the mainstream courts, the policing, the patrolling, the very, very vicious nation state, which is part of the semi-feudal, semi-colonial system, does not give you accountability and justice. It is not based on justice. It is based on coercion. It is based on these extrajudicial killings. It is based on throwing people into prisons and letting them just rot there for years and years. That's not justice. That is not accountability. And so we really need to have people's governments. We need to have systems of people's governments where the demands for justice are met instantaneously by people's courts, by people's understanding of self-governance. And really, again, it comes back to collective rights, to the rights and responsibilities of the people. I really feel those two words are the key to getting towards a justice system, an accountable justice system to the people. I emphasize both these words, rights and responsibilities. It is if we want our rights, it is our responsibility to be engaged in struggle, all forms of struggle, from peaceful demonstrations to rallies to whatnot, to armed struggle, because these corporations are not going to leave us alone. The hegemony of corporate capitalism, of imperialism, is based on maintaining control and maintaining coercive control over our rights. And the answer to that is come out and fight them on the ground, similar to what is happening in Palestine, what is happening in many parts of the world, but that does not come into the mainstream media because of the media is also corporate controlled. So to me, accountability and justice lies in the hands of the people through the people's tribunals, through the people's justice systems. And that is a task ahead of us, to create those mechanisms which are implementable, which can be actually practiced. And those have to be taught and discussed and brought out from the people's minds onto our grounds where we can implement them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Azra. Indeed, it's our responsibility to fight back because we have the right to live, we have the right to development, and given the current conditions and the situations, we know that imperialists wouldn't hand it to us. Okay. So that being said, can we ask Elaine if you have anything to add from what Azra and Amelia had talked about?
Thank you, Azra and Amelia, both of you, for raising the military dimension, the military industrial complex, you know, those very same arms making corporations that are now continuously actually waging war throughout the global south, and now in front of our eyes are responsible for providing the weapons for the genocide in the West Bank and Gaza, in Lebanon, and so on. These are the very same corporations that are sitting on Ajay Banga's private sector investment lab. They are those very commercial banks and equity funds that are financing the weapons complex. So, you know, the Bretton Woods institutions, in this case, the World Bank, you know, are completely interrelated, if you will, intimately with this whole imperialist destruction of livelihoods, of rights of people in the global south. I wanted to add that the Bretton Woods institutions and other IFIs are not the sole corporate tools for extracting global south natural resources, labor, and capital through debt, and that all IFIs must be shut down as an element of the revolutionary changes that need to be led by peoples of the world. Azra was describing the different types of struggle, and we have to realize this is going to be a very, very long struggle. It doesn't happen overnight. So that's some background. I want to say that also perversely, the Bretton Woods institutions claim that their operations benefit affected peoples. Operations, by the way, in the IFIs is a code word for both their investment projects and structural adjustment operations. And the IMF, for anybody who doesn't know, still uses the name structural adjustment loans, but the World Bank today calls them development policy operations. And it's their onerous conditionalities that harm people's livelihoods, violate their basic rights, especially women's and indigenous people's rights. However, as I highlighted earlier, the real beneficiaries are the corporations that rule our world. And the Bretton Woods institutions, as Azra said, they're just not going to get out of the way, without a very long local-led struggle, and that is not going to be easy. So while we're in this stage of actually organizing struggle, because we don't have a global organization movement yet to shut down the Bretton Woods institutions and the other IFIs. So I just wanted to add that we do need to tamp down, to try to take some intermediate steps at the same time as this struggle is being organized, as movements are being, or a movement, global movement, is being created. So we have to ensure, meanwhile, that public sectors are bolstered rather than weakened, which is what the Bretton Woods institutions are doing, so that the public sectors can deliver services that meet people's rights to healthcare, housing, food, education, elderly and child care, sanitation, water, energy, transport, environmental protection, legal justice, social protection. Also, affected peoples rather than the corporate-driven Bretton Woods institutions need to be in the lead in formulating the policies that serve people. And so we need conservative advocacy to stop their austerity policies, to stop their public expenditure contraction, their regressive taxation, their labor flexibilization, excuse me, their privatization, etc., all of which increase women's unpaid care work. We need to end the subsidies that right now the BWIs are giving to the corporate sectors. We need to end their conditionalities. We need to end the vicious BWI debt cycles. And finally, in my 2 minutes, I'd say we need to replace our largely male, profit-driven, corporatized, financialized, massively unequal economies that underlie the IFIs and harm poor, largely female, unpaid workers with an anti-colonial paradigm which ends corporate power. Thanks.
Thank you, Eileen, for your input. So we ask everyone not to keep their questions coming. Let's put our comments, and if you have any questions, in our chat. So now we move forward to the third question. So shutting down the Bretton Woods institutions is a vision in the long term that assumes a level of reclaiming people's power. Today, what can we do and think about in terms of strategy and tactics to support this vision? Okay, so we have the question flashed on your screens. Actually, our audience can also weigh in and share their responses in our chat. Okay, so we first call Elaine to answer our question. Elaine?
Okay. Thanks. So with shutting down the BWIs as a long-term vision, as Gail just said, I had mentioned earlier, and I repeat, that it requires just massive organizing. Tactically, it would require a united front among numerous fragmented anti-imperialist groupings around the globe who might not share all their goals, who might not fully agree ideologically, but who do agree on the goal to shut down the Bretton Woods institutions as an important element, fundamental to ending the imperialist corporate ruling structure. Since shutting down IFIs and other revolutionary changes that are require massive movement building that will take years. At present, women, men, sexual gender minorities need to build these movements. And again, I'd mentioned this earlier, we must end loan conditionalities, cancel debt, global North wealth extraction from the global South, women, men, workers, and farmers. We must end public-private partnerships, blended finance, such as financial intermediation, which is deeply involved in resource extraction from the global South and human rights violations and ecological damage. And we must end the misleading IMF and World Bank groups' gender strategies, energy strategies, all their strategies, which are embedded. I mean, we must end their misleading content because it's embedded in the Bretton Woods Institutions' corporate neoliberal privatization paradigm. You know, when you read all their strategies, their sector strategies, you see that they are completely supportive of the BWI privatization extractive paradigm. So there's nothing really to support in them. Thanks.
Okay, sorry, we're experiencing a bit of technical difficulty at the moment. So we'll ask Emilia to follow up on what Elaine had mentioned.
Yes, we're starting to talk about imperialism, and now you're having the glitches. I think we need to be very clear about what imperialism is. It's not an adjective. We're not qualifying something. There is an imperial project. So what I think added to what Elaine was saying, that we need to gather all of the anti-imperialist movement. I don't know why everybody here in this webinar and more do not call themselves anti-imperialists and are not in an active struggle against imperialism. I think this year horrible genocide has raised awareness on some dimensions of the imperial project. But I think we need to learn more. We need to understand that in the 80s, in the 90s, the anti-imperialist movement was very strong, especially in the global south. And somehow it became forgotten as an ideological discourse, as an old term that nobody wanted to be identified with. And I think that is why imperialism also helped dismantle our movements. So I think we need to go back to our roots and stop beating our movements and recognize that our movements in the global south, they keep on insisting of the reality of an imperial project, and I think they need our support, and we actually need in all the fields that we work, whether we're working on education, health, economic justice, environment. We need to bring very much to the front the anti-imperial dimension and say, how are we going to be engaged in this? Especially people from the global north, when they're talking about degrowth, I don't know what are they thinking about any degrowth project without it being anti-imperialist, because otherwise, as I've mentioned in some of my papers, otherwise they're just withdrawing into a conservative bubble in which they're watching the world burn while they are just very quietly living the community life that nobody in the global south can live, precisely because we have the imperialists murdering our people, burning our land, displacing communities, predating our ecosystems, etc. So people who are not anti-imperialist at this moment, they're not serious. They're not serious activists. They're not fighting for global justice. You need to start, getting your axis right. So that's that. I will say that's one thing. And for the global south, we are very much aiming at a delinking project at this moment to delink ourselves from the imperial project, delink ourselves from the global north, delink ourselves from capitalists, and that means it has a lot of implications from the point of entry of let us say the economic agenda that can have many technical points, but it also has many mobilizing points, as Elaine was already mentioned. And so I think it's a lot of work, but I don't think it's out of our hands. And I actually don't think also it's something that needs to start in the future, because it's a long-term project. We need to start it now. We need to start with the transition points of entry and support, for instance, a multipolar world, and very much so try to reclaim the process of real economies on the ground, what we in the feminist movement call the materiality of life. How is it that now with the speculative capital, everything is now an imaginary economy? So we need to bring it back and highlight what are the conditions for this materialist conditions of life, and try to raise awareness in our project, in our movements, and definitely I think making bigger alliances between different movements, including the rural, the peasants movement, the food sovereignty, and yes, Ashra was also reminding us on what is it with this disconnect between the trade union and all of these other, like if there is a disconnect between the rural and the urban agenda. But for the South, the rural agenda is very much crucial because it is the source of our lives. So I think we need to go back to those elements, and definitely our feminist agenda is also highlighting the importance of this social reproduction agenda of the tension of capital versus life, and at the core of that is a solution that will be to put the primacy on the sustainability of life. So there are many keys that we need to follow, and I don't think that when we're talking about the IMF and the World Bank, given that we get trapped in their language, in their programs, in the way in which they address to our decision makers, we try to talk back at them in their own language. And I think we need to reclaim our language, our vision, our project, to organize ourselves towards the world that we want to see. Because in the end, that is the one that will be in the materiality of life again, will be posing an option, an alternative to what these people, the lackeys of the monopoly capital are doing. So I think the other element, I don't take it lightly. I think is as I think Elaine and Asha were saying very rightly so. It's not just the military-industrial complex in abstract. It's really the US with their 800 military bases all around the world, including in developed countries. So what are we going to do with the US? And so I think that there are many questions that we need to address and be real about what do they entail. And the organization cannot keep on having these silos. So I'm a development expert, I'm an activist on economic justice, I'm an activist on environmental justice, I'm an activist on peace and security. No, we cannot keep on thinking on those silos. We need to gather together, to strategize together, to highlight the value of all of the movements and to start acting together. And on the other hand, I think, again, I'm very much about calling out not only the criminals that are imposing this, but also the enablers and those that are accomplices to the criminals, those people in the INGOs, the peoples in the NGOs in the global north, the people who are very comfortable talking to us about development when they see our realities and they try to keep on imposing on the same language without recognizing that we have our own language, and now it's time for us to reclaim that. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia. Actually, that's why our campaign is called Reclaim Our Future. And actually, our call to shut down the IMF World Bank is anti-imperialist. It's part of our calls, it's part of our demands as part of this bigger anti-imperialist movement. Speaking of which, we call on Azra, who would be able to expound on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, everybody. It's been great listening to all of you, Lane and Amalia. I think the key word is a united front. There is no other word which really describes the way forward. Unless and until we stop putting ourselves into these brackets, which the capitalist world has created deliberately. It's called specialization, you know. So when they treat us in our human body, we have lungs, we have a heart, we have the blood circulatory system, and each doctor doesn't know anything else except that particular organ which he or she is treating. And that is the problem. That is how they have created these really fragmented approaches in our minds and in their policies, and they want us to do the same. No, it will not happen. It will certainly not happen. And it is not happening also because people are smarter, you know, people are much smarter than these goons who run the imperialist system of treachery, of conspiracy, of creating these horrendous wars of aggression, and then also creating these falsehoods amongst the people. So fascism is the name of the game now. And I think the onus is on us to build a united front. I think the most critical uh, components of our society are the people who are on the ground, the grassroots. It's the working class, and it is the rural communities. And the divide is, Amelia, you're absolutely right. You know, when we have these activists, many of these activists will not step out of their comfort zones. Our task now, each and every one of us in the anti-imperialist movement, which is fighting the war zones, which are fighting these defense corporations, the food and agriculture corporations, no matter what, they're all stemming from the same root of imperialism. We need to also just forget these hats that capitalism has put on us, on our heads, and instead we need to really put forward the biggest forces of humankind, and those are the working classes and the peasantry, who's responsible for the entire creation of wealth of the capitalists. And it's time that if we really want to shatter the imperialist world, if we want to regain the world, if we want to have a future on this earth, then we need to put the trust in the people. Please let us bring out the people to come and speak of their reality, of their learning, and of their indigenous knowledge which they have. They are the ones who can save us. You know, we were in my office, we were talking about it yesterday, that if this war ends up in blowing up the oil fields in the Arab world, what is going to happen? And a colleague of mine was saying, you know, we are used to walking, we are used to riding the donkey, we are used to riding a cart. For us in the third world, we know how to survive. We are not changed to machines. We are not like semi-robots. And that is the truth of the people. Please have faith in the people, the young people, the youth, the women, the elderly, the adults, all of us together will be able to create a better world. And that is the united front. No matter which part of the world we are, whether we are in the so-called imperialist world, the G7 nations, Europeans, Australia, all the home fronts of imperialism, or we are in the third world, where our elite are worse than some of the imperialists. We are one. And that is the unity, that is the political education we need to bring from the people to us and from us to the people back. It has to be a constant recycle of political education, where the word imperialism and fascism become known to everybody. That is the truth that has to be driven into our all our communities, where we have to build up the fight. Unless we do the political education, we will have very weak linkages. And to me, that is the most critical part of driving out the imperialists from this world, is to do thorough political education based on the facts and truths given by the people to us, and building on that, and then combining this technical knowledge which is there, this political macro level geopolitical knowledge to the ground knowledge. We create a whole, and that whole has to be the guiding force, and the power rests in the people, and that is where we put our faith. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Azra. And hopefully our webinar today is contributing to the political education of the general public on how imperialism actually impacts us, and why do we call down imperialism and shut down the IMF World Bank. So of course, we also thank you, our speakers, for sharing your knowledge and expertise, which we hope that our participants here also share to your respective members and networks, so that we could further build our unity in this anti-imperialist movement. So now we move forward to our open forum. We have a few participants here who have already asked to take some time to speak. So first, we call on Hala Ali from Al-Marsad. So he is from Palestine.
Hello, thank you, Gail. Thank you for introducing. Hello, everybody. I'm Hala Ali from Al Marsad. I'm a research associate at Al Marsad and a researcher at Stars of Hope Society. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I will keep my remarks brief as I am to provide a quick overview of a case of Palestine and about a commentary paper prepared by Al Marsad, especially since some of the points have been already covered by the speakers. As we may all know, yesterday, October 7, 2024, marked a year since the start of the genocidal war on Gaza Strip, which has resulted so far in around 43,000 martyrs, 103,000 injured, and more than 2 million displaced individuals. 7 October represents a result of practices of occupation against Palestinians over the sequence of 74 years of occupation and a form of resistance against colonialism that Palestinian people have been engaged since the beginning of the occupation in 1948 until now. The comparable to the liberation movement against colonialism that various countries have experienced in the past, and it continues to suffer from its effects to this day through the ongoing indirect colonial policies that are directly linked to the economic hegemony. It is also important to confirm that, as the speakers already mentioned also, that historically colonial powers have been tied to the capitalist interests and major world powers, and they are inseparable from the current global economic system that the political and economic interests of great powers. The existence of Israeli occupation is a consolidation of hegemony on the Middle East. Global tools, including international institutions and organizations, serve as instruments to impose the hegemony and support colonialism. The World Bank is considered one of the tools of the colonial capitalist system that is a part of a colonial framework that imposes liberal economic visions. The reports and the recommendations issued by the World Bank often ignores the colonial reality of countries. For example, its recommendations and recommendations, for example, for the Palestinian Authority are framed within liberal diagnosis that encourages it to borrow and to implement assumptory measures which overlooks the structural factors affected by the policies and the occupation control. In light of the genocide in Gaza Strip now, the World Bank's reports continue to cover up the policies of the occupation. Recently, the World Bank, in cooperation with the United Nations and the European Union, issued a paper or a report on the economic losses and damages resulting from the war on Gaza, titled Damage Assessment Report, which ignored any political dimensions that contributed to the catastrophe situation in Gaza. Al Marsad issued a commentary highlighting the main points presented in the report, including the significant damages at the economic level in Gaza, as well as outlining the gaps which can be summarized in some points. As first, it ignores the colonial context and fails to address the real problematic issues, such as ending the ongoing genocidal war against Gaza Strip, lifting the blockade, and mobilizing funding for reconstruction without financial conditions that reinforce dependency. While the report mentions human losses, it does not address their economic impact, and at least in increasing poverty and the loss of many families' breadwinners, or the reduction of savings and the extent of subsequent deficits. The report also does not refer to the occupation in any way as a cause of the economic collapse, nor does it treat the Gaza Strip as part of a state under occupation, and it fails to hold the occupation responsible for the damage caused, including bearing the costs of those damages. Finally, so we think that any international reports on Palestinian economy that don't blame the occupation and its policies are supporting colonialism in a way. Thank you.
Thank you, Hala, for your input, which expounded on how concretely the IMF World Bank are actually complicit to these wars of aggression, especially by the US, as well as the ongoing occupation of Palestine. And of course, we are in solidarity with the Palestinian people in your resistance. Okay. We'd like to call on next Piana Abab from Oxfam.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Yeah, I wanted to come in and just give a few reflections briefly from what I've been hearing from our partners on the ground. So in brief, we know Oxfam works with country partners across over 80 countries at this point. And when it comes to engaging World Bank and IMF, I think I absolutely agree with what panelists covered in terms of direct impacts and lived experiences from these decisions and policy advice given from top down in Washington D.C. or even from the political elites of nation states across the globe. And I wanted to highlight the particular experience that people were facing in Kenya in light of the recent finance bill that the people effectively rallied against and successfully, at least for the time being, prevented the finance bill from being passed. And I was actually talking to a colleague on the side about this, thinking about the third question on tactics and priorities to meet this urgency that Emilia, you really highlighted well here. I think it's really important to think about how we have discussions around abolishing these superstructures and this deeply ingrained systemic infrastructure that upholds ideals about what human prosperity looks like, by first and foremost starting with political education. I think one thing that comes to mind is, again, I'm not trying to point her out or highlight if she doesn't want to speak, but Nash on the call from my team based in Kenya is actually also a activist and a social media influencer, a young person, represents someone who is simultaneously coming of age and coming to this political consciousness in the rise of this crisis. And we have talked about the importance of making sure that everyday people are able to recognize these, superstructures and ideas behind economic policies in simple terms or in terms that they can relate to. I think it requires a lot of investment from us who are the more, I guess, specialized, trained, familiar advocates who also have experience operating with these actors, again, from top down, these at the superstructure level, and guiding folks to this unlearning and also alternative learning of what we are actually fighting towards, what economies we need, and making sure that general people have the information as well as resources that they need to fight back. And I guess one last reflection that I wanted to offer is in terms of this fighting back, sometimes I feel also sometimes paralyzed on the advice that I would give to our country partners and country teams, recognizing that their battle is two-part. One, pushing against these institutions, this macro infrastructure, pushing against the IMF and World Bank, and their interventions, which are deeply rooted in and based on neoliberal economic frameworks, et cetera. But they also have a battle fighting against very corrupt governments, harmful, toxic governments, or so-called governments, right? And it's a tricky realm to be in. And I think that, the people on the ground need to be united with a clear consensus on how to move forward together, in order to combat both arenas, I guess. I hope that was helpful reflection.
Yes, thank you, Piana. That's why we're really working on these kinds of webinars as part of our contribution or effort for that political education to really educate more people about this and to really invite more people to join us in the struggle. Okay. Last but not the least, I'd like to call on Wali Haider from Pakistan Kisan Mazdoor Tehreek from Pakistan.
Thank you, Gail. I would like to start to give red salute to Hala Ali from Palestine and to red salute to Palestinian people's struggle. We just finished a year yesterday, and we around the globe people had show solidarity. So all our solidarity with our Palestinian people's struggle. Thanks PCFS and all the organizer to organize this very important webinar. And Azara, Aline, and Amelia provide some thought-provoking ideas. And for me, it was very informative and knowledgeable. On the theoretical aspect, we heard a lot. I want to share a recent happening in Pakistan. Last week, IMF approved a 37 months extended fund facility, about $7 billion. Few months back, we finished a bailout plan from IMF. And out of that bailout plan, there are more inflation, more hunger, more joblessness, more high price of energy and oil. But this 37-month extended fund facility, according to IMF, is promised the new program will require sound policies and reforms to support the authorities' ongoing effort to strengthen macroeconomic stability, address deep structural challenges, and create conditions for a stronger, more inclusive and resilient growth. So this, the false narrative, like in climate negotiation, we as civil society say, false solution, this carbon trading and offsetting and all that. So this eye-washing is mean nothing. If you go to IMF website, you will find this. So this will bring inclusive growth and resilient, all that economic growth. But on the contrary, the deal indicates that the situation is becoming extremely complicated. Before entering this negotiation and approval, Pakistan took several actions, including fast-tracking the privatization process and sharply increasing electricity and gas prices. The new deal shows that the IMF is still not satisfied and it's asking for more. Apparently, there is no end to these demands. There should be no ambiguity that the IMF's new program will bring bitter consequences. It will unleash inflation, lower growth, and sale of Pakistani assets. The IMF has asked Pakistan to phase out incentives to the special economic zone, phasing out agriculture support prices and associated subsidies. And this special economic zone, it's important to mention under CPEC project. And the CPEC is, you all might know, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which US and their Western allies does not want to be implemented. And they always pushing their agenda through IMF so that this economic agreement between China, Pakistan should not move properly. The major impact would be on agriculture. Agriculture is already Pakistan's most neglected sector. Farmers suffers from multiple problems, and there is fear that poverty is increasing in the farming community. The government has left farmers under the climate crisis, as we have been facing, heavy rains, heavy flood, and it is the rural and farming community who are facing more atrocities of climate crisis. Above all, these economic conditions and the new conditionalities will further complicate the situation for farmers. IMF also asked Pakistan to expedite the privatization process of state-owned enterprises. And you see, the irony is they are not asking only to privatize the not profit-making industries, but also state has to prioritize which state-owned industry need to prioritize, but they are making that privatization for profit-making industries also be done. Thirdly, Pakistan will have to comply with demand to keep the exchange rate open and let market forces decide the value of the Pakistani rupees. At one hand, they say there are inclusive growth and more resilience. But if the rupees will down, since the production of export commodities is linked to imports, rising dollar prices do not make for any easy restoration of the balance of the trade. Pakistan industries cannot export locally produced goods to services without first importing necessary input or materials. If a country is heavily dependent on import to produce its export, the cost of production goes up. That's where the major economic crisis lies in many of the third world, especially countries like Pakistan. And we will never be independent on large production and large production industry if we will be always dependent on imports raw material. So in conclusion, we fear more inflation, joblessness, poverty, hunger, and miseries for the working class and peasantry in Pakistan by the new IMF deal. In such a critical situation, webinar like this become very important to sensitize, to be more aware. I would say, like Azra and many here mentioned, political education. This is political education for us and for the common people, so that we have a conscious response and preparedness to fight and resist to this monster with what we call imperialism, and their subsidiaries like IFIs. I would like to quote what Emilia said. Thank you, Emilia, for making this very blunt comment. You, if I remember correctly, you mentioned that if you are not anti-imperialist, you are not a rights-based activist. It's high time for us to be more direct and more concrete political and ideological positioning, so that we can rightfully plan a strategy how to counter these hegemonic power. Especially, many of you have already mentioned, we are witnessing a genocide right across the corner. And in this kind of scenario, we really need some out of the box, not the mainstream angiotic approach. Compromising the stances will not work anymore. So unless or until the working class, the peasantry, the like-minded group come together and plan out various kind of strategies inside, outside, all kind of strategies. The freedom and aspiration of the people will not be achieved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wally, and thank you for actually sharing your situation in Pakistan, no, which is a concrete experience on how the IMF World Bank impacts our countries. And of course, likewise, we also express our solidarity to the people's movements in Pakistan. So we will be entertaining a few questions that were raised in the chat earlier. And we will also be telling which speaker would, or we will suggesting which speaker would be answering these questions. Okay, so the first one, this is addressed to Elaine. Is financing from Eastern states any better? Answering this requires an analysis or understanding of whether these other IFIs and MDBs or multilateral development banks actually have different logics and propagate alternative ideas and economies, or if simply the actors and winners are just different in name. So this question came from Fiana.
Hey, Fiana, hi. Fiana, I've been following the Beijing-based Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the Shanghai-based New Development Bank, of course, the Asian Development Bank based in Manila, the African Development Bank based in Cote d'Ivoire, et cetera, et cetera. It makes no difference. All of the multilateral development banks, they all share the same. The word you used was logic. I'll use that word. Basically exactly the same imperialist framework. They all have the same structures in place, which allow the largest corporations of the world to compete, they say, to procure contracts or bids to implement IFI projects, which are really driven by the imperialist corporations of the world. There is no difference really at all. They are all on the same page. They are all extracting resources from the global south, even if they're global south based, like for example, the African Development Bank and the Asian Development Bank. So that's an answer in a simple format.
Thank you, Elaine, for that. Okay, next question is addressed to Emilia. This came from Dos or Dose, I hope I pronounced that right, from Adet Togo. What do you think of the Pact of the Future that was adopted by world leaders? So this was adopted during the UN Summit of the Future last September 22 to 23. This is not about the Bretton Woods Institutions, but are still related to current dynamics of imperialism.
My answer is very short. It's a waste of time. Luckily, it's a very long document that nobody's going to read, so we can forget about it and go back to the real things, real businesses. And it's a project of the Secretary General, and I've been advocating for him to resign. We should call for him to resign. He's done so much harm to this world, so we shouldn't pay any mind to that. It's a ratification of the status quo over and over and over on the dead language. Is exactly the global framework, the G20 and the IMF, et cetera. So just forget about it. It's horrible, and it's just saying the word as it is. So yes, we don't need any document that is telling us that. We want to transform it, so we have many opportunities to do that. I also wanted to mention this because this comment, it's coming from analytical place, my political position. When Fianna says that there is this tension of activists in the global south between fighting these global institutions and also fighting the corrupt governments in the global south. So people in the global north needs to start fighting the global north corrupt governments, because people in the global south is fighting the global institutions, their corrupt governments, plus the corrupt governments in the global north. And we've had enough of that. And we've actually in the global south have been spending our life in fighting our corrupt governments. And there is this tension, there's a growing example in all around the world where movements are sometimes gaining fields, and then some leftist movement are gaining space, whereas in the global north we see over and over that the right wing is gaining and people is not organizing at all. And so we don't see people coming out to the streets with the fierceness that we see in the global south. And now the example that the freedom fighters are showing in spaces like Gaza, like Lebanon, etc., that shows a way that we haven't seen in the global north yet. So I just want to say this very clearly, because again, it seems like the territory for dispute is the global south, and it is not the global south, it is the world. And we don't see people in the global north organizing, and INGOs in particular. I'm not calling at you, Fianna, I'm calling the Oxfams of the world, the Greenpeace of the world, the Action Aids of the world. I'm calling out all of them. They need to start organizing for the global north. You have all of the methodologies to mobilize, to generate citizenship and governance. Go and apply those to the global north. That's what we need. We need people in the global north to mobilize. And you have all of these amazing resources. People in the global south is mobilizing without INGOs telling them to do so. We need the global north people to mobilize for real and not coming with this, again, this developmental discourse that is coming, that is in a preaching manner to people in the global south. We know what we're doing. And the other element is just, this is a technical conversation between people here also, right? Governments in the global south are not corrupt. So we do have the points of entry of the elites that are in alliance with the imperial project of the global north. So this is why, again, we go back to the imperial analysis. But on the other hand, we do have this larger macroeconomic analysis that shows that corruption is a very scale of elements in the global south. We need to go for the bigger picture, like IFFs, illicit financial flows, and the larger flows that are coming to debt for the global north, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the unequal exchange is so evident that we cannot put the responsibility of the situation of the global south in the corruption of their governments, rather than this larger systemic narrative. So I think this is a frank conversation that we need to have, so that we also, the same way we said, what is the role of peasants movement? What is the role of trade unions? What is the role of, we were saying, even the NGOs? I think it is very important to start asking, what is the role of INGOs in all of this? What is the role of NGOs in the global north? And it is time that they start engaging in these conversations from their point of view, of their own positionality within their own territories. So I think it is very important for us to see that, because it's not that we in the south, we need help. And there is a diaspora of the south in the north that is suffering all of these impacts. So I think there is a larger room for mobilization in the north that we haven't seen yet. And this is the type of tactics that we are all invited to discuss publicly, no? And to see how also in the global south, there are conditions to help to do capacity building from the south to the north on all of these actions that are happening for decades in the south that is not happening in the north. And I think it's time that, for instance, INGOs can also provide some platforms for and funding for that to happen, right? So I think there is a large opportunity here with all of the knowledge and materials that has been developed in these entities, but they keep on going back to the responsibility of the southern people. And I think it is about time that we turned it into the global north people and their territories and the action that need to happen in the global north. Thank you.
Thank you, Emilia, for such a powerful answer to that question earlier. Although I'd like to bring back what Azra had mentioned earlier, the building of a united front, and it's a task that every one of us has to do as part of our building of our anti-imperialist movement. Okay, so last question, but not the least, is addressed to Azra. So this came from Jean Orsolino from Courage. In the Philippine context and maybe applicable to other countries as well, should be the heightened call to stop debt and interest payments. But we can only do that if the government is ours. For the time being, what concrete measures can we adopt? Please, Azra.
I think it's already been said. Our governments are basically goons of the imperialists. I cannot think of many governments whom we could call governments for the people, by the people, as the Americans are always talking about it. And so I just repeat myself, the trust is in the people. And I would like to say to Amalia, NGOs are not the people, neither are INGOs the people. The people are the working class and the farmers, and that's where we really need to put our work and hearts and our minds, so that that is our, those are our power holds, and that's where we need to go back. When you say what strategies we can take immediately, yes, there's no harm in saying cancel the debt, and then build around that. It should not be like a sole call. I would much rather say shut down imperialism. The institutions of imperialism are all intertwined, and they have very strong interlinkages and chains, and they come together as a shield and as a force against us. And we need to know the particulars, of course, the nitty-gritty of the World Bank, the IMF, the World Bank. But when you bring the people to the front to fight, it's not necessary that they need to know who the board of governors are, who the executive whatever something is in the IMF and the World Bank. The reality is the suffering. The suffering is because of the imperialists, because of their many different policies. I can tell you 10 different agreements of the WTO that are killing farmers from the day that it was conceived and implemented to this day. And the farmers know that. They may not know the name WTO, but they know that the governments are responsible for what is happening. And that is the call that we need to make, that the capitalist system has taken away everything from this earth, from all the biodiversity to the climate imperialism to our lives, our livelihoods. Everything is at risk now, including the imperialists themselves. If there is a climate crisis, there's a hurricane building up in Florida right now. And I was reading that the military bases there are scurrying around trying to protect their assets. I hope they all get destroyed. But it's our call. To me, the tactics are to have a united front, to maybe attack their fronts individually, one by one, but also to show the unity of those attacks. If we just have a single-minded, myopic view of shutting down the IMF and the World Bank, it will not make any difference. It has to be an anti-imperialist front of the people, with the people in the forefront. The INGOs and NGOs are actually, to me, not very critical. The resources are ours, the minds are ours, the power is ours. So if the INGOs stop funding us, does that mean the people's struggle will go away? No, it will not. I think in many ways it will strengthen. I forgot to say this, I was going to say this earlier, that in Pakistan, the boycott of all these colas, the Pepsi Cola, the imperialist colas, the, what are they called, the KFCs, the McDonald's, and so on and so forth, has been very successful. And in this one single year, just one single year, a day, to a year today, we have at least 5 different cola drinks on the market which are being produced by local manufacturers. So it's not to promote cola, but it is to say that these hegemonic forces take away the space for us to build. And so boycott, take the boycott seriously, not only for, of course, for Palestine, for the bloodshed in Palestine, but for all of us. Stop using that nonsense, only use what is critically important for you to survive as a political activist. If you need a big phone, if you need a good phone, go ahead. Need a computer, go ahead. But don't buy the nonsense. What you can do without, do that. I remember for many years, the Palestinians were telling me when I would meet them, they would say, be self-reliant, Azra, build that up. And I always used to think in terms of like production and big things, but it's the smallest to the biggest. Everywhere, build your own, make your own. Do not go to these markets and buy from them. Bring down their bloody economy, and that's where we stand. So do all fronts, do political education, do economics, do climate, do everything. It's a unity. Let's not specialize. Let's not put ourselves into brackets. Come together, hold hands together, and we will defeat them for sure. Of that, I am very, very certain. Thank you.
Thank you, Azra, for responding to the question. I think it's really important that you stress the importance of workers and farmers movements being at the core of our larger anti-imperialist movement. And we are all here for that unity, not just to shut down the IMF World Bank, but indeed to shut down imperialism. So now we're at the final stretch of our program. For our call to action, here is Rodolfo Lahoy from Ibon International.
Hi, I hope to be brief since this will only be some concluding remarks. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for joining and staying. It has been, I think, a very important discussion in that all our speakers have answered frankly difficult questions and provided answers that will, I think, marinate for a few days more among the attendees here, and in a way challenge our own assumptions too, challenge the current trajectories of our work and how we can move forward and advance our struggle at a higher level, on a higher understanding, and a more comprehensive understanding of the world. So yeah, one thing that our speakers highlighted is the importance of political education in this, and not speaking in isolation of the people, but actually letting the people speak from the people to the people, understanding imperialism as monopoly capitalism that is structured to divide the world economically as well as territorially, militarily, in the name of expansion, and how these imperialist dynamics relate with national dynamics, with elites, with some would call perhaps comprador elites in global south countries, and how that kind of understanding bear on our tactics, our struggle, and the need to advance at the end of the day, a united front against imperialism. So moving forward, we just like to alert our colleagues and comrades here that at Ibon International will be organizing this October in-person educational and cultural events, both in Manila and in Washington, D.C., as further spaces to expand and discuss these issues. There will be an educational cultural event in Manila targeted for October 20 that involves a small panel as well as a sewing circle as a way of creative response, creative way of having a panel on current imperialist interventions today. We're also working with activist groups in Washington, D.C. and hopefully holding another educational and cultural event that aims to review the basics from an anti-imperialist lens, including US geopolitical and military strategy, as well as people resistance. So watch out for more information on those in the coming days. We'll also be supporting allies organizing the World Bank Action Day on October 25 noontime in Edward Murrow Park in front of the World Bank, and hopefully we can bring these calls against imperialism in those kinds of spaces. Lastly, our activity today is also part of the global month of solidarity with peasants this October, led by the International League of People's Struggle Commission 6, the Asian Peasant Coalition, the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, and Pan-Asia Pacific. So as you can see here, this is part of a string of activities, educational activities on imperialism, imperialist plunder, on imperialist wars of aggression, on fascism, and land concerns. So indeed, the framing here of not discussing IMF World Bank in isolation, but discussing imperialism and its tools and manifestations and its dynamics is essentially the framing that we want to end up with, no, in this and in the following discussion. So feel free to take a screenshot of those activities and attend them as well. Last 2 points. So hopefully one takeaway we have from this webinar is also an invitation for our organizations to link with anti-imperialist formations and networks such as indeed the International League of People's Struggle, and at national level continue arousing, organizing, mobilizing, rejecting the pervading influence of these institutions, of imperialist powers, and tacticize, no, how we can struggle for our rights and sovereignty. No? So step by step, let's work together towards supporting our collective fight, our social movements fight, our people's fights to erode, destroy the power of imperialism, and in the long run, no, shut down these institutions of the IMF and the World Bank, build people's power, go back to our CSOs, our social movements, to further advance these kinds of analyses and the more holistic understanding of imperialism and how we can use this framing in advancing both our advocacy, our campaigns, and our struggle for economic and social liberation. So, because indeed, you know, shutting down these institutions is part of our long-standing struggle of building solidarity, international solidarity, and winning, no, in our own struggles, no, against imperialism. So thank you once again for attending the webinar. Looking forward to hearing your feedback and hearing from you again in the future. Long live international solidarity, down with imperialism, shut down the IMF and the World Bank. I pass on the microphone again to Gail to just formally end.
Thank you, Rodolfo. Actually, if I may add, we're also organizing the Global Day of Action for World Hunger Day on October 16. So October 16 is World Food Day, but we are highlighting the hunger that rural people are experiencing. So please join us on this day. You could organize on-ground activities and even share your thoughts or your calls online. So our theme for this year is uphold people's food sovereignty, defend peasants' rights. So yeah, again, this is Gail from the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, and on behalf of Ibon International, we thank everyone who joined us today, and we hope to see you in our upcoming activities in the next few days. So with that, we're formally ending our webinar today. Thank you.